What actions from education do you consider crucial to reduce the current social gap?
I think that what we first need to understand is that all children are capable of learning. And somehow we have to do a better job with educators in general. Because I think what happens, the research is fairly clear. If you don't believe that, you get very different treatment of students. So some of the research, for example, was if a teacher asks a question to a student who they believe to be high achieving, and the student gets it wrong, the teacher will rephrase the question because they think, oh, it must be the way I've asked the question because I know that this child knows it. But if it's a child that they don't expect to get it, okay, they'll ask the question, and if the student gets it wrong, they'll just move on to another student. And and that to me is all related to teacher expectations. And I think that's the first thing we have to change, is that we have to really get teachers to understand that all students are capable of learning, that some students are much more difficult to teach. That doesn't mean that you know they're going to be easy, but they all deserve the best opportunity to learn. Teachers don't have the right to decide who's going to learn and who's not going to learn. Okay. Secondly, I think that we need to start recognizing the background from which the students are coming. And by that, I differentiate between what I call outside-in teaching and inside-out teaching. Outside-in teaching is when a teacher talks about a particular issue or a concept. What they'll do is they'll give students examples from their own world. In other words, the world outside of the student. And they'll try to get the student to understand what they're teaching through examples with which they're not familiar. Inside-out teaching, on the other hand, is you start using examples from the culture and the environment of those students that you're teaching. And that's the connection we need to make, because we cannot make the connection from outside to inside. We have to make the connection from inside to outside. That's the way we have to bring them along. So I think that's the second thing we need to do. And the third thing we need to do, I believe, is to get better quality information and data on students with a focus on what they can do, not what they can't do. So many of the tests that we give, if a student, we talk about how many they got right. Okay, and multiple choice tests have been a problem in that area. All you know is they got it right or they didn't. But if they didn't get it right, that doesn't mean they don't know something or they can't do something.
What is happening there?
Yes, you know, we need to find a way of getting students to demonstrate what they know and what they can do, as opposed to what they don't know and what they can't do. And I think those three, there are many other things I could get into, but I think if we were to focus on those three, the expectations, the moving from inside out, and a development of evaluation instruments that enable students to let you know what they know and don't know, or what their misunderstanding is, so that you can correct it. Yes, this is a tremendous change. We have been preaching equality of opportunity in the United States probably since the 1950s. So it's been almost 70 years that, and nothing has changed. And the reason is that there's a difference in definition. That equality means treating people the same. Okay. Equity means treating people fairly. Okay. If we have students that are very diverse in their home background, in their language development, and we treat them all the same, they're going to end up just as different or more as when they came into school. And in most cases, it's more different. There's some research that suggests that the variability among students in 10th grade, this would be 15 years old, is probably 10 times as large as it was when the students were 8. And that's what happens if you treat differences equally, they end up as differences. And we have now 70 years of research to suggest that. Equity, on the other hand, is fairness. Are we being fair with students? And I think that's a good way of starting to think about what we need to do differently. Equality is easy. No matter what the kid is, you treat them the same. But fairness is a much more difficult issue because we have to sit down and say, what does this student need? What do these students need? How do I distribute the resources that I have so that people get their fair share of the resources?
Jalisco educational project seeks especially to promote inclusion and equity. Which advice would you give teachers and managers so that school become inclusive and equitable community?
What is unfair? And then let's stop doing unfair things. Okay, so for example, if we take students and we have provincial or state or national tests, and all students at a particular age have to take that test. But we have different levels of the curriculum that we're putting students in. So we have academically gifted students, and we have average students, and we have low achieving students, remedial students, and so forth. Is it fair to give a test to students who have not had an opportunity to learn what's on the test? See, and most people would say, that's not fair. Okay, that's just not fair. Or another example would be behavioral indicators in a classroom, the rules that we set up. Is it fair to have rules that are established for a particular category of students, maybe middle class students or maybe upper class students? Okay. And yet those rules are so different from the rules that the students experience every day in their homes or in their culture. And I'll give you a very concrete example of that from some research that was done with the Native Americans in the western part of the United States. They set up a discipline act and the practices and so forth and so on, and the teacher was scolding this Native American child, and he was looking down like this, looking down, and she said to him, "Look at me when I talk to you." That's exactly opposite of what they're told to do when they're being disciplined.
Yeah.
What they're told to do is what he did. You look down, you look shamed, because they think that looking at someone is a challenge. You don't want to do that to adults, right? You don't do that to an adult. And here this teacher is putting rules into the classroom that are inconsistent with what kinds of experiences the child has. And again, the question I always ask then is that fair? Okay, and so by going through unfair to get to fair, I think I'm able to help people a little more understand what equity really means. But I recommend that you really get teachers together, step one, and start to really analyze their practices but not looking at fairness, because that's too hard.
To be conscious?
Be conscious of what practices do we have now that are unfair. That's the first thing I'd come up with. Then I would next say, let's say I find 4 that we agree, these are unfair practices, I would then get them to focus, put them in priority order. Okay, what's the most important? What's the next most important? What's the next most important? Okay, And to get started, I'd probably try to choose those that don't require a lot of money. Okay, that we can make these changes without having to spend a lot of money, because that's very difficult. That gets into the kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, that we don't want to take money away from these kids to put them on that kids. That's what you hear all the time. So that'd be the second step, would be kind of a priority order. The third step to me would then develop a strategy for, within a fixed period of time, implementing what they've come up with. So we're going to take care of grading practices. We're going to take care of discipline policies. We're going to take care of watered down curriculum. We're going to take care of unfair, inappropriate tests. Okay, all of those are unfair. There are examples of unfair in every one of the things I mentioned, but you can't do everything at once. You have to have a plan for moving from this one to this one. And find ones that not only don't require a lot of money, but are more likely to be successful. Because once teachers see that something is successful, they're more willing to spend the time on the next thing. If the first one fails, okay, teachers retreat. Okay, so we have to build success into those early attempts. We can't waste as many students as we're wasting now. We can't have students dropping out of school. We can't have students that are graduating from school barely able to read. Okay, that's a tremendous strain on our society.
Yeah, a deep reflection. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you.